Hey everybody, Scotia here, and we're about a week away from the Game Awards, which I think takes place on December 8th or December 9th, depending on the time zone. And of course, while all the awards are going on and all that, I think most people, myself included, we tune in to see all the possible announcements that might be coming in from many different games and game developers all over the world. So with that in mind, this video is basically going to be me just kind of like, not necessarily predicting, but just kind of like throwing some ideas out of some things we can see maybe from the show. Majority, if not all of these, are going to be fighting game related, because that's obviously the main topic of this channel, but there is a couple of the things I might throw in there every now and then that are non-fighting game related that I either would like to see or hope to see, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so that's basically what this video is going to be. So we'll start with what I assume for quite a lot of people will be one of the most anticipated kind of speculations, which is whatever NetherRealm Studios has been working on will hopefully show up at the Game Awards next week. So for quite a few years now, NetherRealm have been in quite an obvious pattern where they've kind of alternated back and forth between Mortal Kombat and Injustice. And after Mortal Kombat 11 came out in 2019, that pattern kind of ended, because since then we've had like nothing, just not even... Well, we've had the odd tease here and there from Ed Boon on Twitter, which I'll be getting into in a minute, but for the most part, like officially, we really have no idea if their next game is going to be another Mortal Kombat, another Injustice, or something new entirely, like not necessarily even fighting game related. For me personally, I really hope their next game is Mortal Kombat 12, and I know a lot of people will probably, you know, not necessarily disagree, but be like, oh, you know, I want this, I want Injustice 3, I want something else. But for me, I've been way more into Mortal Kombat my whole life. I mean, I have the dragon tattooed on the back of my leg, you know, if you want to kind of get an idea of how much of a fan I am of Mortal Kombat. I know it's not a series I do a lot on or talk about. I have tried in the past, but for whatever reason, those videos just never did really well. So, you know, hopefully if it is a new Mortal Kombat and I talk about it, hopefully I can get, you know, some Mortal Kombat fans in the channel, like invested or whatever. But yeah, a big fan of Mortal Kombat, have been for most of my life. So yeah, I think naturally I would prefer that. I think all in all though, I'm not a fan of Injustice. Like I really liked Gods Among Us when that came out in I think like 2015. 2013. And you know, I did like that game. I am a fan of DC, not super. I used to be around about the time when Gods Among Us came out. I was really into DC, but you know, these days not so much. But I really just did not like Injustice 2. Just something about that game just didn't grip me. I did not like how it played. The roster I thought was okay. You know, the character I wanted the most was Red Hood, and I thought how he turned out was just, I just wasn't a fan of how he turned out. So yeah, you know, if it is Injustice 3, I'm okay with that, because you know, I think there'll at least be something there that I'll, you know, be interested in. Hopefully I'll enjoy it more than 2. But yeah, I 100%, if NetherRealm are announcing a new game next week, I really want it to be a new Mortal Kombat. I won't go into too much detail in terms of like what I want from a new Mortal Kombat, because I feel like that's a topic that's better suited for its own video. Like if it does end up being Mortal Kombat 12, that is the game that gets announced next week. So, you know, I'm just going to kind of keep it brief, but there was a rumour, there's been a few rumours actually, that the next game is going to be a kind of like trilogy type game, and by that, for those that don't know, there's been a trend throughout the series where like every now and then, usually at the end of a trilogy or at the end of like a saga of the series, Mortal Kombat will do a kind of game where it has like everybody that was in the series like up till that point. I believe the first was literally Mortal Kombat Trilogy, and then Mortal Kombat Armageddon was the last one that really did it. So I think we're due for another one. I'm personally, that's probably what I would be the most into, like, because I did like 11, but I was kind of disappointed a bit with the roster. I feel like there were a lot of characters that I wanted to show up, not just from X or from, you know, from 9, but from other games in the series that just never came back. So yeah, that would be what I would want the most. In terms of like clues that we could have that could, you know, maybe point us towards what they're doing next, Ed Boon has been quite vocal on Twitter the last couple of, you know, weeks to months, which I think is usually a sign that something's gonna, you know, happen again with NetherRealm, because I believe not long before they announced Rain, Melina and Rambo for MK11, he was quite vocal on Twitter again, which was pretty much the last time we like got something from NetherRealm. So I definitely think, you know, that kind of does point towards something related to NetherRealm happening at the Game Awards. But yeah, like outside of like, you know, kind of these tweets here and there, which to be honest, the thing with Ed Boon and his tweets is they're tweets that you shouldn't like read into 100%, but it's something that, you know, is worth kind of like keeping in mind to kind of look back on later on when you're like, oh, that's what he meant by that tweet. But I think the most kind of like blatant one is, there's two actually, from what I remember. There's one where somebody asks him like, is the next game you're doing a sequel? And I believe he said something along the lines of, if you consider Injustice 3 or MK12 a sequel, then yes, which is pretty telling. And then there was another time someone asked him, like, flat out, like, what's the next game? And he said Injustice 3 or MK12. And I think that's one of those things where it's like, don't read too much into it. Chances are he is kind of like messing people about. But, at this point, it kind of is like, it is likely to be one of those two things. Like I said before, obviously, like, personally hoping for MK12. But you never know. We might get a complete curveball. We might get a completely new game announced. We might get a fighting game and a new game announced. If in an ideal world we could get both Injustice 3 and MK12 announced. I don't think that will happen. Obviously, I think that would be kind of just completely crazy. But yeah, we're kind of in this thing where it's like just waiting to see what actually is the case, like what NetherRealm are doing next. I know it's very highly anticipated. A lot of people have been very thirsty for news from NetherRealm for quite a while now. Like I said, it's been a long time since we last heard like anything about them, about what they're doing, about what they're working on. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for like NetherRealm. Like I said, I am pretty confident they're going to be announcing a new game, whether it's a fighting game or whether it's Injustice or Mortal Kombat. We'll have to see. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're at the moment. I think after, whatever NetherRealm's working on next, I think for me, probably what I'm most interested in seeing is something from Street Fighter 6. I know that's a topic and a game that I've covered a lot on this channel already. In terms of like what we could get from Capcom and Street Fighter 6, I think, a character is pretty much guaranteed. I hope, it's more than just one character. I'm not expecting, another complete blowout like they did at Tokyo Game Show in September, where they revealed like 4 characters at once. I do not think that's happening at all. I would love it if it did, but I just don't see it happening. So I think like 1 to 2 characters is kind of about what I expect. In terms of who it could be, I think a Street Fighter 2 character is pretty likely. I think that's the safest bet. I think in terms of just, worldwide recognition, because the Game Awards is obviously a pretty big stage, I think, a safe and familiar Street Fighter 2 character is probably the perfect kind of opportunity for that. So I think Zangief is probably likely. I think it'll either be Zangief or Cammy. If it's Zangief, I think it'll be Zangief and Marissa. I think those two big, big powerhouse characters, I think would be a fun reveal, like a kind of like duo, like double reveal. If it's Cammy, personally, I would hope for probably Manon. I think those would be a good duo to reveal as well. But yeah, I think it's either. I'm more leaning towards Zangief. I think he's pretty likely. Because I just think, it's a World Warrior. The last time Street Fighter 6 was at a Jeff Keighley related show, it was Guile, who was another World Warrior. So by that logic, to me, I think Zangief's a pretty safe option. I think at this point, the only other thing that they could probably show for the game outside of a character, I don't think we'll see anything for like World Tour or Battle Hub or anything like that. But what I think they're likely to show off at the Game Awards is the release date, which is obviously something that a lot of people have been anticipating. I know there was a lot of speculation and theory that it was going to be February again, just like Street Fighter 5's was. But I think Capcom put out in their kind of like marketing sales thing that they're not expecting any big releases outside of Resident Evil 4 at the start of the year. So it's a shame, but for me, I would rather they took as much time as they needed. The last thing we need is another Street Fighter 5, which I'm sure we wouldn't get, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. But yeah, I think my main reason for why I think the release date is likely is because I believe a few days ago the game was rated in Korea. So I think that's usually a good sign that like maybe not that like it's releasing soon, but like a release date of some sorts is kind of like solidified. So I think that's a good sign. We'll have to see, I guess, but I definitely think at the very least we'll likely get a reveal. Hopefully a reveal of 2 characters. And I think the thing that I would probably want at this point the most is the release date, because I really just want to know, obviously to play the game, to know when I'm going to be able to play the game, but also, for me, so I can plan out like the rest of my channel's content and, in the build up and the lead up to the game's release. So yeah, I definitely hope we get a release date, but I think at the very least the character is pretty much guaranteed. In terms of other fighting games that I think could show up next week, I think Tekken 8 is another one that has a pretty decent chance. It's been a while since we last heard about it. Obviously, had a really good showing at I think it was a PlayStation State of Play when it was announced. Even if it's another, character revealed, or if it's just a normal match, like played out in full, that's not tied to the story mode like the last trailer was, I think, it is about time to see something. I think we are likely to see something for the game, before the end of the year. So yeah, I think it's also likely that Tekken 8 shows up. I know there was a lot of kind of buzz around it because I think Jeff Keighley put out a tweet about the Game Awards, and I think the font and the colouring of it was very similar to the Tekken 8 logo. So, maybe that was a tease for something Tekken 8 related. We'll have to see, I guess. But yeah, I think even if he didn't tweet that out, I think Tekken 8 was already likely to show up in some way. So in terms of like major fighting game announcements we could get next week, I think those are pretty much the main ones. The only other thing I can really think of off the top of my head is maybe something for KOF 15. I know a couple of weeks ago we got that trailer for Season 2 and that clip of Shingo with his render. I think a Shingo trailer could happen. I don't know if it will or not, because in my head I kind of, have to wonder like, what was the point of putting out that Season 2 trailer and, showing off Shingo's render if you were going to like show him off in his own trailer like a couple weeks later. So I don't know, I'm kind of like 50-50 on that. I definitely think it could happen, and that trailer was just purely to kind of like tell everybody here's what's coming up in Season 2, whereas Shingo's own trailer kind of got its own spotlight later on. We'll have to see. I definitely think it could happen. I think it was the Game Awards last year that we got Cronin revealed for KO 15, which was like still a crazy reveal. So yeah, I think it could happen. You never really know. I would definitely love it if it happened. I really want to see Shingo in game and how he works and when he's coming out and all that. But yeah, I don't know if that'll actually happen or not. I think that's pretty much it though. Like I really can't think of anything else like off the top of my head that could happen. I mean, there's always something like, always get something for Guilty Gear, which again I doubt because we just had Sin. So yeah, but yeah, I definitely think going into the Game Awards, the three kind of biggest ones that I think people are kind of looking out for is something from NetherRealm Studios, something from Street Fighter 6, and something from Tekken 8. So, even if one or two of those things happen, I think it'll be good. But yeah, so hopefully we all leave the show happy. I'll be doing a video probably the day after, maybe the day after that, depending on how long it takes, like export and upload stuff, kind of going over whatever gets announced next week. But we'll see how it goes. So until then, I shall see you all later. Goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.